Hi, folks. Great to have you here. It's already Wednesday as the fastest week in media rolls on. And I am your host, America's real anchorman, also known as the Doctor of Democracy and America's truth detector. Sitting here serving humanity just by being here. The telephone number, if you want to appear on the program today, 800-282-2882, and the email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. You know, everybody's talking about, well, not everybody. The chairman of the RNC wrote letters to CNN and NBC. You guys, we're not going to show up at your debates anymore if you do these mini-series on Hillary. I think you ought to send the letter, just take out the part about the miniseries on Hillary. We're not going to show up in your debates anymore. But they'll never do that. But that's what they should do. Anyway, the RNC very much concerned about all these miniseries on Hillary. Last night, while everybody's worried about a miniseries on Hillary that hasn't happened, Obama showed up for, the sixth time on The Tonight Show. Last night, to show you how the country is changing in a very serious way, last night was the first time since this massive upgraded terror warning was put into effect on Sunday. This was the first time the President of the United States spoke to the American people about this. We closed 21 embassies in the Middle East on Sunday for a full week. The President of the United States of America, the world's lone superpower, the President by reputation, by tradition, the leader of the free world. That's somewhat dubious now, but traditionally that's how our presidents have been referred to and thought of. The President of the United States went to a late-night comedy show for his first ever statements about this increased terror threat. A late-night comedy show. Now, nothing against late-night comedy shows. Don't misunderstand. I mean, I've had my own appearances and fun with Jay Leno. There's nothing wrong with late-night comedy shows, but this would not have happened with any prior president. Matters of such consequence, matters of such seriousness would have been dealt with in a far more serious and appropriate way and forum and time of day. And by virtue of appearing on a late-night comedy show, the president saw to it that these events, and it wasn't just the ramping up of the terror threat level or any of that, there are serious items on the agenda in our relationship with Russia, and all of it was treated as a joke. All of it was treated as unserious, half-hearted. Nothing really to be concerned about. It's a diminishing thing that happened last night. The presidency was diminished last night. The country, talk about being respected or loved, people around the world. This is a very small thing that happened last night. Made the country look small, made the presidency look small. Now, I don't think JFK went on Jack Paar to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was just thinking about that, but I don't think JFK did that. That might be too old, long ago, for some of you youngsters out there. Jack Paar was the original Johnny Carson. I don't think JFK went on the Jack Paar show to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the president goes to the Tonight Show to issue his first words on what is happening on so many fronts. Our microphones were there. You know, even with the president, when the president goes to a late night show, let me tell you what happens. Before you do one of these shows, you talk to a pre-producer in advance of your appearance. And I'm sure this happened with the president as well, probably more so than with most guests. Because the guest becomes part of the show. The guest is not just an empty vessel sitting there waiting to react. The show gives the guest a gig. There is something that, you know, when you're a guest on one of these shows, you take a bit with you. Whatever it is, you're not just going there to be seen. You have a role to play. Either making the host look better, feeding off of the host, taking your own gig, taking over the show, whatever the guest wants to do. The pre-producer gets hold of every guest, and they do the pre-interview. They find out what you want to talk about, what you don't want to talk about. Sometimes they talk about what you don't want to talk about, but that's another matter. Then and I guarantee you with the White House this happened. I guarantee you whoever the Tonight Show people talked to at the White House, there were ground rules. You will not bring this up, Jay. You will not bring that up. Whatever it is. I'm sure these kind of ground rules existed because, after all, this is the President of the United States, and he's not just going to go somewhere and open himself up to anything on a late-night comedy show. He went there for a specific reason, to accomplish specific things. And I don't know whether he thinks he did or not, but what he did was diminish the office of the presidency. He diminished the country. I just think it's a shame. At any rate, after this pre-interview is done, then the guest shows up. And whoever the pre-producer, the pre-event producer was, shows up and they review with you in the green room what you're going to talk about. Are you still comfortable with X, Y, and Z? And then they hit you with any surprises that they would like you to do that they didn't tell you about before you agreed to do the show. Now, I don't know if that happens with the president. But then after that, the host comes in and greets the guest in the green room, and they yuck it up, and they laugh about things, and they have just a short, general conversation about meaningless kind of stuff, and the host may assure the guest what's going to happen, how excited he is to have the guest, and all of that, and then the host leaves, show starts, and it all happens. We've got some audio sound bites that we'll treat you to from that. Do you remember this? This was July 24th, 2007. You probably don't remember this. This was during a presidential debate during the 2008 campaign season. And this was a Democrat candidate debate. This was leading up to the Democrat primaries, the 8 candidates vying to be the Democrat nominee. And there were really just 2 of them by this time. It was Hillary and Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama. And it was on CNN. I've got the New York Times account of this. Anderson Cooper said, let's go to another YouTube video. They allowed viewers to send in YouTube video questions. And one of the YouTube video questions was, in 1982, Anwar Sadat traveled to Israel, a trip that resulted in a peace agreement that's lasted ever since. In the spirit of that type of bold leadership, would you be willing to meet separately, without precondition, during the first year of your term, in Washington or anywhere else, with the leaders of Iran, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, in order to bridge the gap that divides our countries? And then Anderson Cooper said, by the way, that YouTube guy, he's in our audience tonight. Right on YouTube. Senator Obama was asked to answer the question, and he said, I would. I would be willing to meet separately without precondition during the first year of my administration at Washington or anywhere else with the leaders of Iran, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea. I would, said Obama. The reason is the notion that somehow not talking to countries is punishment to them, which has been the guiding diplomatic principle of the Bush administration. It's ridiculous. So Obama said, hell yes, I'll talk to him. I'll talk to him anytime, anywhere. No preconditions. Iran, anybody. And yet it was Obama last night who canceled an upcoming summit meeting with Vladimir Putin. Because Putin and the Russians did something regarding the Olympics in 2014 and homosexuality that Obama didn't like. By the way, Obama embarrassed himself last night. The Olympics that are going to be in Russia are the Winter Olympics, and Obama was talking about all the great athletes on the balance beams and in the swimming pool, and he forgot that it was the Winter Olympics, or maybe he never even knew and probably didn't care. And Obama continued. He said, now, Ronald Reagan, Democrat presidents like JFK, they constantly spoke to the Soviet Union at a time when Reagan called them an evil empire. The reason is because they understood that we may not trust them. They may pose an extraordinary danger, but we had the obligation to find areas where we can potentially move forward. Now, I think it's a disgrace that we haven't spoken to these countries that you mentioned. So Obama said, there's no way I'm going to be like Bush. There's no way. I'm going to meet with all these people. I would never cancel. I would never not show up. I would be there. And now he's president, and he got his little undies in a wad over the Russians and homosexuality. He pulled out of the summit. After saying, these kind of hypocritical contradictions with Obama are frequent and often. And we'll tell you about them in this instance, because he's the one that opened this. He's the one that went to a comedy show to talk about this. He's the one that announced about terror threats in this on a comedy show. For the first time ever addressing the people of this country about recent events.